epidemic, but has acutely hit Baltimore City. In the last month, we've had more than a carjacking every day. As of most recent count, we have over 135 carjackings in Baltimore this year, which is nearly 70% higher than last year. And last year in Baltimore, we had among the highest per capita carjacking rates in the country. This is hitting every part of the city. If you look at the cluster map on the police department's website, you will see that literally every neighborhood in Baltimore has seen carjackings. West and east, north and south, affluent and impoverished, all of these communities are being hit. And victims are of all different backgrounds as well. Young and old, men and women, black and white. We are hearing story after story of the epidemic of carjackings. It's nothing new. Last year, not far from where we stand, a number of carjackings took place. One of them that ended in tragedy was a 41-year-old man on his way to work who was carjacked by a group of juveniles and was run over by his own vehicle and died before he made it to the hospital. Last Friday, a doctor, a trauma surgeon who works at Hopkins, on his way to treat other trauma victims, was in an attempted carjacking, shot, and ultimately treated at the same trauma unit that he works every day to help save lives. Last week, we had pledged that in addition to a comprehensive crime plan, which I think so many of the folks that have heard me speak on these issues is familiar with, that we would provide customized, innovative, detailed solutions to a number of specific problems. Open-air drug markets, human trafficking, burglaries, quality of life crimes, juvenile justice. We start with the first one on the grid, which was armed carjackings. Because we actually do understand the problem quite well. We even know what's driving it. As cars become more sophisticated in their security systems, criminals start turning to live victims to get the cars that they want. When we see spikes in other crimes, burglaries, commercial robberies, ATM thefts, all of those crimes need stolen cars as getaway vehicles. And so when there's a rise in other crimes, you expect an attendant rise in carjackings. If you're going to spend your day committing crimes, you start your morning committing a carjacking. And we've seen that all across the city. The other reason to focus on carjackings is because if you are catching people who are using weapons and threatening people's lives to steal their car, you know that too often they are committing other crimes, which means you can drive other crime categories down as well. But documenting and dissecting the problem is not enough. We need solutions. We need something new. We need something now. So today we are unveiling a 5-part plan on what we would do as state's attorney to curb carjackings. First, we would refer each and every armed carjacking to the U.S. Attorney's Office for federal review. Not every burglary is a federal crime. Not every murder is a federal crime. But every carjacking that happens in this country is a federal crime. There's actually a reason for it. Because in order to be a federal crime, it has to impact interstate commerce. Well, cars are viewed as instruments of interstate commerce, and every armed carjacking under federal law is subject to federal prosecution. People need to know, criminals need to know, that if you commit a carjacking in Baltimore City on our watch, it won't be a local cop and a local prosecutor whose dockets are burdened coming after you. It'll be a federal agent from the ATF or the FBI and a federal prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office that's looking and reviewing and investigating and prosecuting that case. Second, we are going to dedicate a seasoned, experienced prosecutor to each of the 9 police districts to focus on carjackings. The dedicated prosecutor will be a resource for the community, for the police department, and for the courts. The courts and the police department and the community will know that there is a prosecutor who handles carjackings in that district. They'll share intel, they'll collaborate, they'll develop best practices, they'll get good at prosecuting this particular category of crimes. So even if there are information deficits and disconnects in the police department, the prosecutor's office will make sure that those deficits are being addressed. they'll make sure that there's a person to turn to address these carjackings. The third thing we're going to do is to launch a jack alert system. Everybody's heard of amber alerts and silver alerts. We're going to launch a system called jack alerts. When a carjacked vehicle is reported to 911 or to a police officer, as soon as the police can identify the tag and the description of that car, we'll talk about how that will happen in just a moment, that will be notified, the public will be immediately notified, and license plate readers, red light cameras, speed cameras that already have the technology to capture license plates will be on notice as well, so that we can create a scatter plot of where the car is going. Ideally, we'll be able to do it in live time. We'll certainly be able to look at it in retrospect to understand the patterns that are happening. People will know to keep an eye out for those cars, and criminals will know that the moment that 911 call gets made, they are being monitored. That car is being monitored. Just like amber alerts and silver alerts, we know that this expedites the amount of time before apprehending the criminal or rescuing the child. We know that those times get contracted when the public is on notice of a particular category of crime. The fourth thing we're going to do is to provide financial incentives and subsidies to encourage residents and drivers and commuters in Baltimore City to install GPS tracking services. If you are insured with State Farm right now, they'll give you lower insurance rates if you install a beacon tracking service in their car. There's lots of reasons why insurance companies do it. We want to do it not only to deter criminals, but also to apprehend folks faster, to make it easier for police to track the vehicles once the carjacking notification has gone out, and to build a stronger, clearer, triable case for prosecutors that we can take to juries to secure convictions against these dangerous repeat criminals. The fifth thing that we're going to do is launch a public education campaign. The police department already issues advisories. I've seen it on Facebook groups in Patterson Park where there's been a spate of carjackings. The police department tells you what you should do to reduce the risk of carjackings, to reduce the risk of what happens to you during a carjacking, as well as information you should learn. They actually encourage you to install GPS tracking systems and invest in them. They don't provide any incentives, but they already encourage that. They encourage people to not sit in their car idling for too long, to make sure that they keep a certain distance before another car. They encourage you, if you are carjacked, to not resist, to give up the keys and to walk away. They also encourage you to learn your license plate and the description and year and model and make of your car. Well, that's terrific for the people that are on Facebook in Patterson Park. But we ought to launch a citywide campaign because this is becoming a citywide problem. We can pretend it's not a problem, but everybody who watches the news, everybody who's seen a neighbor get carjacked knows that this is becoming a part of the tapestry of crime in Baltimore. Every day, in every different neighborhood, we are seeing carjackings of young and old, men and women, black and white, and we need to do something about it. I'm going to, for the purposes of making sure that the folks that joined us at home understand, just very quickly chronicle what we're going to do. Number one, we're going to refer every armed carjacking in Baltimore City to the U.S. Attorney's Office for review. Number two, we're going to have dedicated seasoned prosecutors assigned to each district that handle carjackings as a single resource for police, for courts, as well as for the community. Number three, we're going to launch a track jack system where we're going to encourage and provide financial incentives for folks to install GPS tracking services so we can track carjacked vehicles once the notification goes out. Number four, we're going to set up a notification system, a jack alert, just like an amber or silver alert. Folks that are carjacked will notify the police, and that information will be shared with the public as well as the police, taking full advantage of the license plate reader systems and camera and red light camera systems that we already have. And finally, we're going to launch a citywide public education campaign so that people know what to do to reduce the risk of carjackings as well as what to do in the event of a carjacking. I'm so grateful that people are listening to this issue. I'm incredibly sorry that it's taking another round of carjackings to bring attention to this issue that has frankly been a problem in Baltimore for far too long. I'll take any questions.
Does federally prosecuting carjacking cases, does that mean that they sometimes
Yeah, look, I'm the only candidate in the state's attorney's office that served as a former assistant U.S. attorney, as a former federal prosecutor. And what I know is that the U.S. attorney's office has a lot more resources and many fewer cases. They have the ability to make sure that each case is getting a close, hard look, and to make sure that each prosecution is getting assigned 2 prosecutors when those cases go to trial. I've tried a carjacking case. I think I'm the only candidate in Baltimore City that secured a conviction among the candidates that secured a conviction in a carjacking case. Those cases are tricky, they're complicated, but there is a set of evidence that can consistently convince juries to find these criminals guilty and to hold them accountable. I think the U.S. Attorney's Office also will make clear to the criminals in Baltimore City that there are swift and certain consequences. Right now, criminals walking around Baltimore don't fear consequences in the city system. They're worried about the feds coming after them, but they're not worried about the city prosecutors and the city police. That's got to change. That's not going to change overnight. So especially in the short term, we can share this burden. The U.S. Attorney's Office can't help us with every burglary. They can't help us with every homicide, but they can help us with every armed carjacking. And letting folks know that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and the ATF are also looking at those cases and are ready to prosecute those cases, I think will be a sea change in the culture around carjackings.
One of the 5 things is assigning a seasoned prosecutor to each of the 9 police districts, and it seems like one of the themes that's come up during this race for state's attorney has been perhaps a lack of experience within this current state's attorney's office. Yeah. Where do you get the seasoned prosecutors, and if you're moving them from within, where are you taking them?
Yeah, look, there's models for this all across the country. Robert Morgenthau was the legendary DA in New York City. And over the course of a 40-year career, he built what many regard as the greatest prosecutor's office in American history. He would go into local law firms, local law schools, the best law firms and the best trial law schools in the country, Temple, Harvard, the best firms in DC, the best firms across the country. And he would walk into rooms of people and say, look, I want you to come and work at the Manhattan DA's office. You're going to work hard. You're going to work a lot of weekends. You're going to get paid a dime on the dollar compared to what you're making in the private sector. But you're going to learn more about trying cases than you will for the rest of your career, and you'll do more good in your 4 years in the Manhattan DA's office than you will for the rest of your life. It worked. People came in droves. It wasn't a pitch that worked on everyone, but it worked on the right people. And here's the thing, New York City isn't Gotham anymore. Baltimore is. And we ought to use the challenges that we face to recruit seasoned prosecutors that were in local offices, in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I came from the U.S. Attorney's Office to the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. There are many others that would follow suit. There are people that are in the private sector that would love to help fight crime in Baltimore. There are prosecutors in neighboring jurisdictions, in D.C., where there's more lawyers per capita than anywhere in the world, that would love to learn how to try cases. There's plenty of talent out there. We just got to get it into the office, and building a world-class office, just as Robert Morgenthau did in New York City, has got to be part of what we do.
So it's a recruitment effort more so than a reassigning folks?
Well, look, there are some terrific prosecutors in the office already. They don't have great mentors. They don't have great seasoned managers that can teach them the ropes. We certainly need to find some seasoned people to bring back into the office, but we also need to cultivate the talent that's already there. Any other questions? No questions about TrackJack? No questions about the Jack alerts? Do you know how hard our team worked for those buzzwords things? Yeah. If TrackJack goes anywhere, we're going to go ahead and grab the trademark for it. So don't starting companies with it. I end with some levity because this is a really hard topic to talk about. For the folks at home, they know that carjackings have become a daily conversation in too many neighborhoods. If we're going to do something about it, we have to do something different. We can't just say we're going to solve crime by being more aggressive on crime. We need some more details about that. I want to end by emphasizing something that really folks need to hear. This is not the comprehensive solution. We, of course, need to invest in our schools. We need to develop better rehabilitation and reentry programs. We know all of the hard work that has to be done in the long term, that are seeds that have to be planted today. My father used to say, the best day to have planted a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best day is today. So we know that that work needs to be done as well, but that's where the conversation has to start. It can't end there. We also need detailed, comprehensive, customized solutions that are rooted in common sense, that are rooted in experience to address problems like carjackings. Next week, you'll hear about another problem. I don't expect everyone to come every time. The folks at home will tune in, but I think it's really important to understand that these problems, these challenges that are everyday problems for the citizens of Baltimore have to be part of our solution. We need solutions, we need something new, we need something now. Thank you so much for coming.